Okay, so you want to own an 18th-century coffee house. You picture dark wood booths, pipe smoke curling toward the ceiling, men arguing over a single newspaper somebody else already read twice. That picture is missing from the account book. A penny buys the coffee. It also buys the seat, the paper, the fire, and as much conversation as a man can stand. And none of that adds up to profit on its own. By 1739, more than 500 coffeehouses were competing for space in a city you could walk across in an afternoon. Most of them failed. A handful of them didn't just survive, they turned into institutions that still run parts of the world's financial system today. The difference had nothing to do with the coffee. We're going behind the counter and into the ledger. What it cost to open one of these rooms, what actually kept it profitable, the government crackdown that could shut you down overnight, and the two ordinary coffee houses that became something far bigger than anyone who opened them intended. Then we'll answer the only question that matters. Could you have gotten rich? First, the name undersells the business. Coffee is barely the product. You're really selling a chair, a fire, and a room full of information nobody else has bothered to organize yet. Understand that distinction now, because every decision that follows depends on it. The building itself needs benches, long communal tables, a roasting apparatus, and a fireplace that never goes out during business hours. Add coal, candles, and enough newspapers, pamphlets, and shipping bulletins to justify charging a penny just to sit down. Skip any of it, and you've built an empty room instead of a coffee house, a space where nobody has a reason to talk to anyone. Location decides almost everything else. Rent on a decent city address, somewhere near the exchange or the docks, runs high because location is the entire product. Proximity to trade is what your customers are actually paying for. Set up on a quiet residential street instead, and the coffee itself won't save you. The conversation that made a coffee house valuable never had a reason to walk through your door in the first place. Licensing came next. Selling coffee, tea, and chocolate publicly required a permit from local magistrates renewed annually, and the Crown had opinions about what got discussed under your roof, opinions that mattered more than you'd expect. Staff costs stack on top. A boy to run errands and relay messages between tables. Someone to mind the roasting. Someone to keep the fire fed and the floor swept between the hours you're technically closed and the hours your best customers actually show up. Add it together, and the coffee house looks less like a shop and more like a small, permanently running utility. You haven't sold a single cup yet, and you're already committed to keeping the lights, the fire, and the news flowing every day of the year. Drink is the obvious sale, and the weakest one. Beans are imported and taxed. Coffee spoils within days of roasting, and a customer nursing 1 cup for the entire afternoon pays the same penny as a man who drinks 4 cups in 20 minutes and leaves. Judged purely as a beverage business, the margins barely survive contact with your own regulars. What actually earns money is what the room enables. Merchants rent your tables to inspect cargo samples before agreeing to a price. Underwriters gather in the same corner every week to price the risk on ships that haven't returned yet. Brokers post prices on your wall because everyone in the trade already knows to look there first, before checking anywhere official. None of these people are paying you for coffee. They're paying a penny for access to a room where the right people happen to be standing. This is where specialization becomes the real business model. A generic coffee house selling drinks to whoever walks in competes with 500 identical rooms and loses. A coffee house known as the place where marine insurance gets priced, or where one trade's brokers meet every Tuesday without fail, stops competing on coffee entirely. It becomes infrastructure. Once a trade settles into your room out of habit, moving to a competitor means losing the entire network that made the meeting worthwhile, and nobody wants to be the one explaining to their partners why the deal fell through because the venue changed. London's coffee houses split into trades the way modern platforms split into niches, and the pattern held everywhere you looked. Garraway's ran regular property and goods auctions alongside its tea and coffee trade, turning itself into an early auction house that happened to also serve drinks. Childs, positioned near St. halls became the informal meeting room for physicians and members of the Royal Society, who used it to trade research findings the way merchants traded cargo prices elsewhere. Buttons built its entire identity around literary men, writers, critics, essayists producing London's newspapers, turning a coffeehouse into something close to an editorial office with better ventilation. Not one of these owners invented a new drink or a faster roasting technique. They noticed which group of people needed a room to meet in, gave that group a reason to treat the coffeehouse as theirs, and let reputation do the advertising a penny of coffee never could. Call it what it actually is, an exchange with a coffee entry fee. The owners who understood that distinction stopped thinking of themselves as innkeepers within a year or two of opening. The ones who never made that mental shift kept selling drinks to strangers until the rent ate them alive. Costs escalate the way they always do, quietly and then all at once. Coal and candles burn daily whether trade is good or terrible. Newspapers must be bought fresh every morning or your regulars simply read yesterday's news somewhere else. A slow month still owes the same rent as a busy one, and city rents don't negotiate downward out of sympathy. Fire is the risk nobody budgets for correctly. You're running an open flame all day, every day, in a wooden building packed with paper, in a city that had already burned to the ground once within living memory. One spark from an unattended roaster, and the business, the ledgers, and possibly the building next door are gone by morning, and insurance against that exact outcome is, ironically, one of the very products your own regulars might be pricing for someone else's ship at the next table. Then there's the government. In December 1675, Charles II issued a proclamation to shut coffeehouses down entirely, on the grounds that they had become breeding grounds for seditious talk and false rumors about the state of the nation, which, to be fair, they largely were. The order lasted 11 days before public and commercial pressure forced a reversal. But for those 11 days, every coffeehouse in London was operating illegally, and every owner had just learned that the Crown could end their livelihood with a single sentence whenever the conversation in the room got too interesting. Taxes compounded the squeeze from another direction. Newspaper duties pushed up the price of every sheet you needed to keep on the tables, and the coffee itself carried import duties layered on top of already thin margins. None of these taxes were designed with coffeehouses in mind specifically, but a business built entirely around cheap paper and cheap coffee felt every increase immediately, in a way a general merchant selling 100 different goods never would. Reputation risk runs alongside all of it. Let the wrong argument turn violent, or let a rival's coffeehouse become the address where a trade's deals actually close, and your regulars migrate overnight, taking the entire network with them. The network that was the real asset, not the furniture. Credit is its own slow bleed. Regulars run tabs, trade on reputation, and expect patience, and an owner who can't tell a temporary cash flow problem from a customer quietly going under ends up financing someone else's bankruptcy one unpaid penny at a time. Two ordinary coffeehouses show exactly how far this could go, and neither owner got rich by pouring more coffee. Edward Lloyd's coffeehouse near the Thames is the first. Lloyd opened it in the 1680s in a location that put him directly in the path of sailors, ship captains, and merchants moving goods through the port. He did not become powerful by selling better coffee than his neighbors. He became powerful because those sailors and merchants kept arriving with information nobody else had yet: which ships had sailed, which had been lost, which cargoes were worth insuring, and which weren't. Lloyd started collecting and eventually printing that intelligence himself, turning gossip into a product. The underwriters who gathered at his tables to price marine risk against that information never stopped meeting there, even after Lloyd died, and by the 1770s their subscription room had formalized into an institution with rules, membership, and its own list of insured shipping. That institution is Lloyd's of London, and it still prices global risk today. He didn't get rich pouring coffee. He got rich owning the room where risk got priced, at exactly the moment that pricing became valuable enough to formalize. Jonathan's Coffeehouse, tucked into a narrow alley near the Royal Exchange, tells a rougher version of the same story. Stock jobbers had a reputation for being loud, aggressive, and generally unwelcome, and around 1698 the Royal Exchange had had enough and threw them out. They didn't disband. They simply relocated to Jonathan's and kept trading exactly as before, except now the coffeehouse owner had inherited, for free, a room full of the most. A broker there started publishing regular price lists of stocks and commodities, turning the coffeehouse into the closest thing London had to a functioning exchange outside the official one. Within a century, the informal club that met at Jonathan's had written its own rules, started charging subscriptions, and renamed itself, first the Stock Exchange Coffeehouse, then simply the Stock Exchange. A room built for hot drinks and gossip became the institution that still sets the rhythm of British finance. Neither Lloyd nor the owner of Jonathan's set out to build an exchange. They noticed which customers kept coming back for reasons that had nothing to do with the coffee, and they built the room around keeping those customers instead of trying to serve everyone equally. Could you get rich owning an 18th century coffeehouse? Run it as a drink counter competing with 500 identical rooms, and you'll scrape by on pennies, gossip, and whatever's left after rent, assuming the fire, the taxman, or the crown doesn't end you first. Run it as an information exchange with a coffee habit attached. Find the one trade or profession that needs your room more than any other room in the city, and you may end up owning the institution the whole city eventually has to go through. The coffee got the customer through the door. It was never going to be enough on its own to keep him there, and it was never the reason he came back. The information did that, the ship that hadn't returned, the price nobody else had posted yet, the deal that could only close in that particular room, at that particular table, among people who already trusted each other enough to talk business over a penny cup that had gone cold an hour ago, in a room that had quietly become worth more than the entire building it sat inside. Change in all things is sweet,